Hello again from Kampala. It's great to be here with you again for some more thoughts from the Bible. Thank you so much for joining me. Last week, if you were following along with these videos, we spent a bit of time looking at the life of a man called David, a pretty well-known character in the Bible, before he became king of Israel. After the current king, Saul, started threatening his life, David was forced to flee. And he spent quite a bit of time living in a cave, gathering a band of men together. But his life was still in danger. And eventually he realized that he was going to have to leave the land of his birth, to leave the land of Israel, if he and his men were going to survive through this difficult time of his life. So he ends up with the Philistines again. But this time he doesn't pretend to be insane as he did the first time he ended up there. Instead, he makes himself useful to Achish, the king of the Philistine city of Gath. He starts raiding some of the neighboring tribes, and he tells Achish that it's the Israelites he's been raiding. So much does David earn Achish's trust that the king makes David his personal bodyguard. The story goes on, and the Philistines eventually gather to assault the people of Israel. Achish, thinking that David is wholly loyal to his cause, tells him to come along for the fight. Only when the other Philistine leaders take a look at David and say, hey, isn't this David? Isn't this the man who killed Goliath? Isn't this the man who they sing about, who has killed tens of thousands? I don't think he should come along with us. Send him home. Only at that point does David retreat from the fight. And honestly, he sounds a little bit annoyed by the decision. You can read all about it in 1 Samuel chapter 29, and this was David's response in verse 8. He said, "But what have I done?" asked David. "What have you found against your servant from the day I came to you until now? Why can't I go and fight against the enemies of my lord, the king?" But Achish insists, and David reluctantly heads for his home in a place called Ziklag. Now, I've read this story many times, and I've often wondered what David would have done if he and his men had been allowed to join in that battle against their own people. I can't imagine that this man, who was so wholly loyal to his king and his country, that he would suddenly turn against Israel. I think that David had a plan, a good plan. I think that he and his men were going to be in the midst of the Philistines, possibly with their leaders. And when the battle raged, they would be able to deal a devastating blow against the Philistines to help the Israelites win the day. It's a pretty good plan. I think I'd have been feeling quite proud if I was David. All those years of waiting and serving my enemies, and finally they've paid off, and now I get to do something to help my own people. Imagine his disappointment then, when his plan was scuppered and he was sent home. Imagine his absolute devastation when he heard that his very best friend, Jonathan, was killed in that fight. Had David been there, maybe he would have been able to save him. Who knows? What I do know is that it's really hard when our plans fail. When our great ideas and our schemes turn to dust and ashes, and we're left with that crushing disappointment of feeling that we've failed, or that we were wrong in our ideas all along. It can be so very hard to turn away from those wonderful plans that we've created, everything that we put precisely into place, even when God starts leading us in a different direction. It's easy for us to feel angry and a little bit bitter in those moments. This is such a pertinent message for this time, I think, because it's safe to say that every single one of us have had some kind of plans change in this season of our world. Some of those changes have been hard, painful even. Plans that have fallen through, businesses that have failed, jobs that have been lost, hard decisions about the cost of things that we were going to buy, even how we'll just afford food to keep us going through this time. But we have a choice as to how we will respond in the face of changing plans. We can react with anger and frustration, or we can remember that God is in complete control. We can remember that He knows what He is doing, even when we have no idea. We can remember that He is at work, even if we can't see it. This COVID-19 season has been hard. But maybe we needed the churches to be closed for a while to remind us that church is not a building. Maybe in this time, we are seeing God turning what is a terrible, horrible, bad situation and bringing some good through it. He is drawing us back to Him in personal devotion. He is reawakening the bonds of community. And He is showing us the impact that one individual can have in their areas of influence. So many individuals doing incredible things in this time to help their communities, to spread the gospel message. God can work through changed plans. See, when David, he got back to Ziklag, the town that he was living in, he found that the place had been raided. All of the women and the old and the young had been taken. They'd been kidnapped. His men were all but ready to kill him for it. But David was able to lead them and to bring back everything they had lost. If it wasn't for the change in his plan, that situation could have looked very, very different. It might have been impossible to get their people back if they had waited longer to return. The future king of Israel might not have lived through that situation. God was in control. It is hard when plans change, but God is working in it each and every time. In the book of Proverbs, chapter 16 and verse 9, it tells us we can make our plans, but the Lord determines our steps. Remember that when you're thinking about plans that have fallen through, even in the confusion and the frustration of this time, the Lord determines our steps. He is still working on your behalf. Thank you so much again for joining me. I'll see you next time.